Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630. WMAL.
7:07. Mary Catherine will be back tomorrow. We'll get all the details of her big trip up Mount Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that. Right now, though, the boys are in charge.
That's right.
Double dose of testosterone here on the Morning Majority.
And we got Trevor Madish a half hour from now, and Tucker Carlson an hour from now. And Joe DiGenova on the phone right now, our legal expert.
And how can that be a bad thing? That's a good thing.
Morning, Joe.
Good morning, everybody.
Well, we talked about this last hour, this 8-year-old kid in Cleveland Heights who weighs 218 pounds. A third grader weighs 218. And the county has been working with the mom for about a year now. And they say that she's not doing a good enough job of trying to help this kid lose weight. So they took the son away from the mom, and they said they did it on the condition of medical neglect. Can you give me a legal definition of that, or is there a legal definition of that?
Well, in the statute, in all state statutes, there are powers that are given to state welfare agencies to remove children from the custody of the lawful custody of parents if there is some form of endangerment, either from physical abuse or neglect. And medical neglect is generally understood to mean failure to provide necessary care to maintain the health of the child. And in this case, the state is stretching it a bit, but no doubt they have the authority generically under all state statutes to remove children. But here's the problem. This is a very slippery slope. Mm-hmm. When you start to interpose the will of the state over the will of a parent. This is not an abusive parent, and the court, the state welfare agency, is not claiming.
Well, what you say not abusive, and I generally agree with you there.
Well, I mean,
but what would you say? What would you say to
physical harm?
What would you say to those who say that the ability to control this kid's diet and his caloric intake is sort of a form of benign neglect?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not that left of center to be able to do that. It's not my legal strategy. But the bottom line is this: they do have the power. The question is whether or not a court is going to supervise it sufficiently to prevent abuse by the state. This is a very dangerous area for the state to get into when a child is not being beaten or harmed in the traditional sense of abuse. So the bottom line is the public and the press and the courts have to be very, very vigilant when the state decides to do this. They may be right. This may be exactly the right thing to do. But it is a very slippery slope, and this is the nanny state that you really don't want to have unless there's no other choice. This is a cautionary tale. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that the authorities are wrong, but boy, I'll tell you, if I were a judge handling this case and if I were the press, I would be watching it on a daily basis.
Yep. American Bar Association, according to the New York Times, secretly declared that 14 of President Barack Obama's nominees to the federal bench are, quote, unquote, not qualified. And apparently this rejection rate is more than 3 times that of Obama's predecessor, President Bill Clinton and George W. Bush.
Yeah, this is actually
big deal.
This is actually quite remarkable.
Yep.
It's amazing that the New York Times did this story. It was on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and it was a front-page story. I give the Times a lot of credit. I beat up the Times pretty badly, but this story has been hidden, and what it shows is the incompetence of the Obama administration in husbanding the resources for judicial nominees. You know, this is the crown jewel of most presidents. Their legacy lives on through the people they put on the federal bench, and he is way behind in nominating, and now we find out that one of the reasons he's way behind in nominating is that he's putting up people who are deemed literally incompetent by the American Bar Association. And one of the reasons is that the bar says that these people have no trial experience. They're not litigators. They're law professors. They've only worked in government. The administration says, well, those are the kind of people we want on the bench. And the ABA, who is composed of a lot of litigators, especially the ones who pick the judges, says, not so fast.
Well,
you may love their philosophy, but they have to know how to conduct themselves in a courtroom.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall that in the past a lot of conservatives have charged that this group had a liberal bias. Doesn't seem to be the case here, does it?
Well, I can tell you the ABA has learned a very valuable lesson. First of all, they have a new president. He's extremely conservative. He's a very competent fellow. And they are back on the radar screen among some people because of the fact that they've sort of learned their lesson, which was they were extremely liberal. during the Clinton and the George W. Bush administrations. I, for one, resigned from the ABA over it. I am no longer a member of the ABA because of the way they treated Republican nominees for for federal judgeships. But they have come around considerably, and they realized that they were doing grave damage. As you know, President Bush refused to use them in the vetting process. He stopped using the ABA. That was a powerful message sent to them. But the bottom line is, this is pretty remarkable. This is 7.5% of all the nominees. It's the largest number in history.
Wow. All right, to the Syracuse case, just where we thought, Penn State and how awful things were there. Now we find out that there was something similar, or well, perhaps there was something similar going on at Syracuse. They fired the assistant coach, Bernie Fine, yesterday.
Right.
Although legally, he's really not in any trouble because there's a statute of limitations, and there's really still no proof that it actually happened. It was a phone conversation his wife was having with one of the victims. What do you make of this case just in general?
Well, I think, once again, what you have here, I think the really interesting part of this story is the vigorous defense that was put on by the head coach. I think his name is Boeheim.
Yeah, he called the accusers liars.
Yes, and in fact, that may have started the statute of limitations running again for civil suits. Because I think Boeheim is going to get his fanny sued back to the Stone Age. And he may even be fired as a result of this. The university itself is now open up to huge liability as a result of Boeheim's statements. That's why the chancellor forced the firing of Bernie Fine. Universities are learning a very valuable lesson in PR, and that is, while sports departments bring in a lot of money, they also bring in a lot of baggage. Mm-hmm. And this is a problem that probably goes a lot deeper in collegiate sports than people think. And I don't think this ride is over.
Well, I mean, that's a great point, Joe, because I think that we're getting to sense that some of these sports programs at major universities have become far too powerful, and they became untouchable, and nobody ever checked their power. Nobody ever checked their judgment on this, and the roosters, as the chickens they say, are coming home to roost.
These sports programs are understandably well supported by the alumni, and they serve a useful purpose. But the one problem is this: they have nothing to do with academics anymore. These are big businesses.
Yep.
And they're being run like big businesses, and as a result, they're going to be held to a different standard that has nothing to do with academia.
Well, it's one thing if you're paying some kid $180,000 to go to your school or whatever, you're giving some people some, $100 handshakes. And it's another thing when you have children being raped by people who work for the sports team.
And the point is that happens when programs like this get so big and so influential that you can't talk to people in them. You can't tell them what to do. They tell the university what to do. This is a dangerous thing, and I blame the boards of trustees. I blame the general counsels at these institutions, and I blame the assistant coaches and other people. Nobody's going to tell me these people didn't know about Bernie Fine's proclivities, if that's true, and about the guy at Penn State. These are problems involving a culture of tolerance for unbelievably bad behavior across the spectrum. When it comes to this, which is the most venal type of criminality, you see what happens when it comes out. I mean, Penn State is going to be ruined by this.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much. Joe